Hello and welcome to another pattern recognition video featuring simplification patterns. But because I had a request to make the problems more difficult, we're going to have some tougher problems today. I increased the rating difficulty or the level from 2000 to 2500 in that area. It'll be from 2000 to 2500 in that rating range. They may be more difficult. You can still try them and see how you do. Especially for the beginners, try them out and see what you can figure out. All right, let's take a look at this position. We had a knight that was under attack. The knight just stepped off to the side here. White's turn to move. What would you do in this position? All right, now just remember when you're first trying to decide on what move to make, look for checks, captures, and threats always. It's easier said than done. I know sometimes, especially if you're playing blitz, you can be in a rush and you don't always think about looking for those checks first, but they are the most forcing. So we have a check here by capturing the knight. We have a queen capture here. So, at least two different ways to deliver a check there. We could move our knight here, but, maybe that's not as good. It could just be captured. And we are trying to simplify down. So something to do before you decide to simplify is look at the material. So if we count up the material, we have what? 3 minor pieces. Our opponent has 4. But it looks like we can capture this and even things up. Let's see. What are our options here? We're probably going to at least even material up here. Now we could have a 2 versus 1 pawn on the queen side in the endgame after we simplify down, so that could be an endgame advantage. But is there a way to gain material? All right, well, my first thought is to grab this knight, immediately delivering a check. They probably don't want to wreck their pawns and most likely will recapture with the bishop, aiming down here towards my rook. And then what should we do? Well, then we could deliver another check, capturing this knight. So capture, bishop captures, we capture here, delivering a check. And also, we have to watch out. Once we move this knight, the bishop is lined up here, and we're lined up on them as well. So capture, capture, capture with check, and a more, an easier way to simplify down is if you can deliver checks while you're doing it, because that forces your opponent to just respond to those checks. So capture the knight, capture the other knight with check. Now our bishop will be lined up on this bishop as well. So our opponent probably doesn't want to block because our queen and bishop are both lining up on that square. So most likely the king will have to just run away and lose the right to castle. All right, let's see if that's what the computer wanted, or the chess.com. All right. So that was right. Now I said we should capture here. Okay. Well, that doesn't make sense now because here we can just capture and then we grab this right here. So maybe it would have been better to lose the right to castle. All right. Well, I hope you did well on that one. It was rated 22-22. Let's move on to the next problem. Okay, less pieces on the board. So that may mean that things are more simple, but let's find out. Looks like the black queen had just put the king in check. So the king steps forward. And now what do we have here? Let's look at the position. 3 pawns for black, 2 for white. Bishop versus knight and queens on the board. The problem is there's a threat of check. The king would be forced to move. And then mate. So there's a mate and 2 here. We have to avoid that. So we probably need to act forcefully with checks of our own. And we're trying to simplify down. We have an extra pawn. We have a bishop with pawns kind of spread out, so that bishop will be a little bit quicker than the knight. And if we look for checks first, our bishop can't deliver any checks. Our queen could go here, here, or here. And I think you know which one of those is best because if the queen goes here or here, it'll be captured by king or knight. So probably that check looks better. The king would be forced to move, and then we could trade off queens. So, I don't know. That looks like the best move, I'm thinking. But you may want to check after you make that move. It's always a good idea to look at how the position will be once the trades have occurred. So if we go here with check, the king will step off to the side here. We capture. King captures. And then we can trade down further by pinning the knight to the king. If the king tries to go after our pawn and get out of that pin, well, then we can just capture the knight. And once the king captures back, our pawn will be able to make a run for it and promote. So a lot of arrows here. I hope that hasn't discouraged you, especially the beginners out there. So let me get rid of those. Take a look at the position and see what you can figure out in your head. Remember, if you're solving puzzles, try and do as much as you can in your head, before you move the pieces. And here we go. Check, capture, pin the knight, take the knight, and run the pawn up the board, and it'll promote to a queen. So, good example there, and a good pattern to remember where you were able to trade off those queens, but more importantly, the bishop pinned that knight to the king and then took the knight, forcing the king to recapture away from the pawn and giving that pawn time to run up the board. All right, that was a 2170 problem. On to the next one. Okay. We just had a capture there on D7. White's turn to move. What can we do here? Well, the obvious move is to just recapture with the knight. putting the king in check. And then it looks like we would be up an extra knight there. We have to watch out for a possible mate here against our king, because if the queen moves here, this is a good pattern of the queen delivering a check on the back rank, attacking the king, covering these squares around the king, but also covering this square. And the knight is covering that, and the pawn prevents the king from running over there. So we have a danger possibility, or possibility of danger with this queen attack, mate threat. All right, so whatever we do, we have to make sure that it delivers results, that we are able to checkmate our opponent before they checkmate us. Okay. And if we're trying to simplify down, we have 5 white pawns versus their 4. We have the extra knight. Now, how can we check? We could capture, and the king would have to run, but then do we have a good follow-up? We could go here. King would move forward attacking our knight. Then we could take the rook with check here with our queen. The king would take the knight, and all right, let me make sure I have this. We check. The king actually has to move here. Then we take the rook. They take our knight. And then what? Then what do we do? So check, king runs, we take the rook, delivering check, the king moves forward. Now what? We could deliver another check. But our king would just run around here. All right. So maybe we capture with the knight. Delivering check. The king would have to move. But where? Okay, so maybe that's better. If we capture the rook with check, the king could try and step forward. But then what do we do? So if we go there, king steps forward, we could deliver a check. If the king went after our knight, we could step over. So this one is a little tricky here. Take the rook, And we have to figure out where this king can go. So once we go here, the knight is covering that square. Queen is covering these. The queen will actually be covering that one as well once the knight moves. So if the king steps forward, then we can go here delivering check. All right, I'm just going to get on with the problem. So, we go here. And then what? We just keep attacking the king. But I want to make sure there's some kind of follow-up. Oh, okay. This is the point of the problem. Now we can fork the king and the queen here. So this is another thing that makes chess so difficult sometimes, is seeing just that extra move or two ahead. And a lot of times people will stop calculating one or two moves too early. So I read I forget which chess master, but somebody recommended, when you think you're done calculating, try and do another one or two moves further, because then you'll find a move like that. And now we're just ahead by an extra knight, and we have an extra pawn. Well, they'll grab this, but then we can grab that one. So we should be in good shape. All right, that was a 2490 rated problem. So I'm hoping you're doing well on these so far. Let's move on to the next one. I'll try and do 2 more. That way, if I tried to do 10 that I like to do, but the video would drag on because these problems involve a lot more calculation. Okay. What do we have here? Queen is moving up, attacking the unprotected rook. Okay, but it's our turn and we're looking for simplification possibilities. That involves trading material. But before we do that, we should count up the material and see if we're ahead, if we're behind, and that will help dictate our strategy. So if we have 4 pawns versus 4, bishop pair versus bishop pair, rooks and queen. So material is even. All right, so there's a good way here to gain an extra piece. Take a look at this problem. See if you can figure it out. Or maybe I'm mistaken. Let's take a look here. All right, so this one is also more complicated than I anticipated. I thought there was something here, with a check, but the queen is covering that. If we move this bishop, then we have a possibility of capturing this rook. If there was a way to check along this diagonal without them being able to block by this bishop. All right. Okay, a lot going on here. Man, with bishops on a wide open board, it can be just a total mess. All right, maybe there's another possibility. We have this battery, and we should look at checks first. So all the different checks. The bishop can go here. The bishop can go here. Queen can go here or here to deliver a check. And that looks to be all for the checks. Now, if we deliver this check and the queen just captures, and remember, when a king is in check, there's the three options that they have: capture the attacker, block the attacker, or run. Now, if the bishop goes here and the pieces are side by side, well, there's no way to block that. You know, if they're one square apart from one another diagonally. So you have either running, and once this bishop moves, this rook will be under attack. So I think this might be a good way to trade material. So if we capture, the king could just move into the corner, but if that happens, we have a discovered attack. We can capture with check. You know, if rook captures, then we can grab this right here. So I think that's what I'm going to go with. Capture. Oh, and they don't like that one. All right. So what did I get wrong here? All right. What did I get wrong? Maybe I need to check in another way first. My initial thought was this move. Check. And if the queen captures, then what? We capture, they capture, we go here, but that's just an even trade. So maybe we need to deliver. Maybe we need to sacrifice a rook. What if we capture? They capture. Then we deliver a check and we pick off the other rook. So maybe that works. All right, so that's what they wanted. Oh, wow. And then after that move, we can grab the queen. All right, so interesting pattern there at the end where we pull the king away from the defense of the queen. All right, that was 2043. I hope you did well on that one. I'll do one more problem here. So let's see what we have. And this is a common pattern where you have a knight that had pinned, or sorry, a bishop that had pinned a knight to the queen, but at some point the bishop broke the pin. Now the knight moves away with a discovered attack on the bishop here. So, you know, if we look at checks, captures, and threats, we'll take a quick look at checks first. The only thing I see is a queen sacrifice here, but that doesn't really do anything. The king can just capture. Any other checks? No. So now we're looking at captures. We have this unprotected bishop, so we probably have to deal with that. And, you know, if you can mix captures and threats together. So here we could just go ahead and capture, threatening the queen and the rook here. And before we get too deep into this, I should have counted up the material first. So white has what? 6 pawns, 4 minor pieces. So, all right. What does our opponent have? 6 pawns, 4 minor pieces, rooks, and queens. So everything's equal as far as material. All right. Okay. So, if we capture there, we go ahead and take the bishop. The queen will probably recapture because of this line. Our rook is lined up on the queen. And that's something to keep an eye out for. Anytime you have a less valuable piece lined up on a more valuable piece, like anything lined up on the king, like rooks, queen, bishops, I'll always keep an eye out, because if the position opens up here, if these knights try to move out of the way, then there's an attack on the queen. So if we take the bishop here, the queen will most likely recapture. And then what do we do? We could go after this knight next. The queen would have to capture that and be lined up with this rook again. Okay, so maybe that's what this position is all about. Lining our rook up on the queen. So if we capture, if the knight tries to capture, well then we can just grab this and attack the queen. So if we go there, queen will most likely capture. Then our knight can take here and the queen will capture that. Well, then our rook is lined up on the queen. We could push this pawn because that knight is pinned to the queen. So maybe that's what we should try. And now we just go here and pick off this knight. All right. Well, I hope you were able to figure that out. Remember, do regular puzzle solving to improve your pattern recognition, which is kind of like a shortcut in chess, so you can start to recognize these patterns more. And, let me know if it seems like solving puzzles regularly has made a difference and is helping your chess at all. Sometimes you may get worse before you get better, especially if you're trying something new that you don't usually do. But either way, feel free to leave any comments. I always enjoy hearing what you have to say. Like and subscribe to support the channel if you haven't already. Thank you for watching and have a super chess day.